welcome to the Genetics Podcast. I'm really excited to be here today with Caroline Craven, who is also known as the Girl with MS. She is a writer, blogger, and MS advocate. Caroline, it's great to have you here. Thanks so much for taking the time.
You bet, Patrick. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have quite a few different skills, including public speaking, writing, business. I know you're trained as a life coach. And it seems to me like you found a way to combine these skills in addition with something that affects you personally, which of course is your diagnosis with MS. I'm just curious, how did you actually get into blogging and being active on social media and public speaking in the context of MS?
When I first got hit with MS, it hit me so hard. I couldn't walk, couldn't see, really unassisted, and I had to medically retire from my business career in marketing and all that. So I started getting into writing more of the cathartic process, and the blog started taking place. Then all of a sudden I started being asked to write articles for different people and health journalism and all of that. So that expanded that part of my life. And then doing the research and all of that just helped me become healthier in my living. So becoming certified as a life coach, it really gave me the life skills I needed to know to help manage MS. Becoming certified as a holistic nutrition educator was helping me find a better way to live. But then I found other people needed to know this information and wanted to know it. So the blog has just grown from that over the last 10 or 12 years now, since that's really been active. So,
yeah, absolutely. How many posts have you written ballpark did you say 10 or 12 years that you've been writing?
Oh my gosh, a lot of them. On the blog post, probably thousands. And it's interesting when I go back and look, because in the very beginning, it was more of just my journal, me coming out, like what's going on with me, what's going on every day, stream of consciousness sort of writing. And then you can see as it starts to change, I start adding a lot more other information. People would ask me about things and, what about this? What about that? And I started expanding more into other things. And I have a very active mind, and I think a lot of people with MS do. Just they're kind of type A go-getters. They want to be busy, and when you find something that you can do within your confines, it helps.
Well, I mean, from the posts that I've seen, it seems like they're really varied, including, like you mentioned, personalized experience. But you also, I think there was a recent one where you dug into some a new drug that just recently passed clinical trials. So it's everything from the very personal all the way through to the scientific. You don't have a scientific background though, so you must have really just self-trained and learned how to read these papers and understand as part of writing 1,000 blog posts, right?
Yeah, and especially what's probably helped me the most on that was writing for Healthline and doing the health journalism. Probably over 100 of those articles, but diving into these clinical research, it fascinates me. It turns on my whole geek side and my nerd side, and I'm just like, love all that research. And I'm like, and then you really learn a lot more about what's going on. So when people say, oh, it's a T cell reactor or a B cell reactor or whatever, at least you have some idea, and trying to help people understand that. Yeah, I've gotten to interview a couple interesting people, a couple new FDA drugs. We have so many treatments out there now and options, which is great. And I think the most important thing is that people get knowledge on all these different options.
How do people approach that? The previous episode to this one was with Dr. Barry Singer, who you actually introduced me to. And he mentioned in that podcast that there are 20, I think more than 20 now, approved drugs. So how do people go about making that decision? Is it, is that something you've written about? I imagine it probably is.
You know what? That's funny. I'm actually writing about it right now, or been working on a piece on that, because there's so many options out there now. When I was first diagnosed, we had 3 options, the ABC shots, so you want to inject yourself daily, weekly, or every other day,
Right.
That was it. Now there are pills, there's infusions. I think the most important thing, what I found, is that I found a very good MS neurologist that I'm working with. And that really helps me be able to have these conversations, like these 2 new drugs. Is there one I might want to go on that might be better for me? I heard a very interesting podcast just yesterday. I was listening to or watching a webinar, and it was reminding me about the importance. One doctor was saying is that the most important drug is the one somebody will take or somebody will use. So it's a once a day pill, or is it a self-injection once a month, or do you have to go to a hospital twice a year for an infusion? But other things to consider too is the level of your MS and what risks you need to or might want to take. But what a lot of research has agreed on is that they do agree that an earlier approach with medicine can prevent further progression on down the line. And that's intriguing. A lot of people are not on disease-modifying therapies and go the natural and holistic, and I've done a lot of that. So I'm more intrigued now with the newer medicines out, like what might be an option.
Yeah, well, and I think there also seems to be a potential collision of those two worlds, because many pharmaceutical companies are working on cannabinoid therapies, right? And cannabis is one of the very very widely used in medical marijuana, and also some of the I think there's an FDA approved something from GW Pharma. So there's these two worlds are colliding, right? And the natural is becoming part of the pharmaceutical pipeline.
Interesting. It's Sativex, which is by GW. It's not approved in the United States. Yep, it's approved all in like 25 other countries. And it's very interesting. They are doing a lot of research. They only do FDA-approved drugs, and I know they're looking a lot into the use of cannabinoids for spasticity and stuff like that. So.
You mentioned Healthline earlier, and I've heard of it, but I honestly don't know very much about it. What is it? What is Healthline? How did you get involved writing for them?
Yeah, healthline.com. It's a medical research, I say a little bit like WebMD, just the kind of same concept, a lot of research, a lot of articles, everything's fact-based. I was actually approached by them. By their editor. They wanted someone to start writing who knew the disease and could understand and relate to the people, but also could get into and meet with the doctors and understand what the clinical research is. Yeah.
To be that bridge, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are cluing into this. So I know the British Medical Journal, the BMJ, has now a number of patient advocates on staff, and I think they require in any research paper that's submitted, I think it has to be reviewed by a patient, or that somebody can correct me on this. I won't be correct on the details, but it seems like more people are embracing the importance of people like you that can bridge those two worlds.
Yeah, I really started to see a change about 10 years ago, I think. 8 to 10 years ago, the pharmaceutical companies really started grasping the importance of the MS is more than just a drug or a medicine or a disease. It's multifaceted. So dealing with life, I think my first world tour was probably 7 or 8 years ago with Madeline Stowe. It was kind of fun and high, but you got to really meet with a lot of people and talk to them about skills that you learned. And it was fascinating to see, I think, and it still is, to be able to work with these companies, because they do understand that it's a lot more than the drug, and they want to be there for their patients.
What was the world tour? Where did you go? What did it
was pretty fun. We went to now it's going to be an MS memory jog, but I know we did Houston, Orlando, Pittsburgh, and I think a couple others. So it wasn't a full, huge world tour, but it was close enough. And other than Pittsburgh, I got to go fly fishing in the other two places, which is a hobby of mine. So that's often where I remember. It's like, oh yeah, I caught that fish, and we were down in Florida, and we were
That's great. So were you visiting researchers and kind of pharmaceutical companies, and what was that? Was it organized, or was it just a spur of the moment thing?
That one was organized, and that one was more working on a specific drug with a specific audience. Right. Since then, I've worked with a lot of different other companies where you meet with researchers or pharmaceutical people working on, what are some of the key messages. few years ago, one drug company just came out with an ad that really negatively affected people's response to it because
Right.
it didn't quite take into all levels of MS. So I noticed that everybody's sort of very aware now that they need to have that patient advocacy.
Yeah, and have to really understand who the user of the product is, right? And I think to the point you made earlier that you heard in the webinar you were a part of, that if it's not something that resonates with people that they'll actually take and use and solves a real problem, then all the great science is for nothing in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very interesting. And with the drugs, especially once just to bring this up real quick, but once a generic comes into the market, that changes the whole scene. We actually have states here in the United States that prohibit companies from offering financial assistance once a generic is available.
Really?
Yeah. So Tecfidera just lost their patent early. They're still fighting it. But patients on that coming out in January, if they don't change to the generic in time or don't switch drugs or don't talk to their doctors, or doctors may not even know, they could get hit with a big surprise on their copay. Not all states are like that. I just sent out a little email blurb on that and was working on something. I just found it fascinating because I've not been in that position. And my doctor was like, that's something people need to know, so a little different, but I wanted to bring that up because I thought that's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up the kind of sea change or shift in thinking 10 to 12 years ago where at least the pharmaceutical industry started to think a lot more carefully about that. I wonder how it has changed since then, and what was it like then and what is it like today? Has there been much change since then, or do you feel like there's that there's still a lot of work to be done?
I still see a lot of change, and just alone, and I wish I had the numbers. I don't right now on top of my head, but like the amount of dollars, say, that the National MS Society is putting into research regarding diet and MS has become huge.
Right.
You look at the different doctors and whether you agree with their diets or not, but they've done a lot to figure that out. And I learned that early on. My diet was key. Gut health was key in keeping me healthy. And because of patients' demands to a lot of these associations, their dollars are starting to go for a lot more alternative drugs, as well as important things like neurofilament light chains, things like that. Neurofilament light chains, it's hard for me to remember, but that's just one of those things that are coming up. You hear more and more about it. So there's just a lot of growth in that, and I would say it's continuing to grow.
You mentioned gut health. I think I saw you post on Twitter at some point that at some point you actually had been diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease, right? Or Crohn's or colitis.
Ulcerative colitis.
Colitis.
Yep. Yeah.
Tell me about that, because that's relatively common. At least it's much more common with people who have MS than in the general population, right?
That's interesting. Actually, yeah, it was a very interesting case because I had it for a couple of years when I was living up in Oregon, up in Eugene. And that was when I started getting into Chinese medicine and acupuncture and doing alternative stuff. That was sort of the kickoff because the doctor wanted me to go on these sulfa pills or something. And I remember my friend who was an acupuncturist and yogi, he was like, let's try some natural stuff. So we went through breathing, we went through all that. I just had a colonoscopy a week ago or so, and they're like, you're clean for another 10 years. They can't even find anything. And it used to show up. I had 2 different doctors tell me I had it. So very interesting. I don't really know what happened. I shifted definitely. But yeah, I'm learning more and more about that and related to people with MS.
To another IBD, really great active patient advocate guy named Seb Tucknott, and he was able to basically get his ulcerative colitis completely under control with combination of diet, exercise. He was on treatment and was no longer needed to be on it because he was able to find a way to manage it. Of course, this isn't the case with everyone, and it's not
Right.
there's no one size fits all, but it is, it's really nice to see actually that the industry is recognizing that it's not a silver bullet, right? It's not just a, one size fits all approach, or that a pill is going to, or an injection is going to always be the case. That it's really a complex diseases require complex approaches sometimes.
Yeah. And that brings up an important point about the fact that the disease modifying therapy is really approaching the disease itself. And so does lifestyle change and all that, but that also really helps with symptoms, It's amazing what just adding some of the wrong food in your diet, for a particular person can affect you the next day, or not enough sleep or something like that,
Yeah, definitely. On the topic of patient advocacy and social media, I saw that you had some of your accounts removed at one point on Facebook and Instagram. And I think this is in context of some wider concerns around the role that these platforms play in, having access to people's information, but also, pulling down accounts because people don't like the nature of the content that's being put out there. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that and whether there was any resolution, because it seems to me like it's an essential tool for people like you to do the work that you do. Obviously, your blog is standalone, which is great, and no one can really take that away from you. But the social platforms are relatively fragile, as people have often found.
It was very interesting. It was right around it was in May. I was told that my Facebook account was closed. And by doing that, it took away my administration rights to the Girl with MS on Facebook, on my Facebook page, where I had, a couple thousand, 25, 3,000 followers that I communicate with on a daily basis. And not only that, but that's part of my work. When you're an advocate, you'll see certain posts that are done that say ad or sponsored or something. So that was part of my livelihood. They took it down. They asked me to verify. I verified myself. I did not get verified. They said, you've been down for good. Instagram does whatever Facebook does. So Instagram just took me down as well. So I lost all of my followers there. I am still working on getting this back up. I actually am finally in touch via one of the big pharmaceutical companies with somebody at Facebook that is actually helping, because there is no way to contact them. There is no customer service. They believe I was compromised and I was hacked. And I think I was too, because as soon as they got me up and running, I got hacked again, unless I was in Vietnam last week, which I know I wasn't. So the interesting thing is they still can't get me on to I'm still not on the admin for Girl with MS Facebook page. So it's all kind of sitting still, which has been very frustrating. I created new accounts so that I could keep up with what I needed to see, because this all happened during COVID quarantine, and it's bad enough not being able to go outside, being able to see people, being able to social, gather, but to have your entire identity wiped off of Facebook. I mean, think of that, 12 years of memories, of photographs of every MS group you could go to, your support group, your friends, your family, you're gone. I had friends die during COVID that I didn't even know died because I couldn't see the news on that. So it's been a really interesting challenge. I've had a lot of people offer, but finally I'm now getting through. So we're getting there, and hopefully I'll have admin rights to that page again, because for so many reasons it's important for us to have that, and they build up a strong social. They need to be able to support it.
What other options exist to connect with people? Is obviously you have your blog, you have email lists, which are difficult for anyone to take away. Facebook and Instagram are pretty commonly used. What else is there? Are there any other alternatives, or are those really the ones? And podcasting, I suppose.
I use Twitter a lot. I have quite a lot of followers for an MS girl over there. People tend to share things because it's short and sweet and all that, and you get a lot of good, quick, the snapshots of it all. That's the thing, is that each one offers something different. So it's nice if they could all work well together. LinkedIn is a great one because you get, say, maybe a higher level of education, or not I shouldn't say a higher level of writing might be, or more research papers might be in there. So sometimes I'll find different things there. But I feel like those are basically it. You're trying to get out there, and so you're trying to find these ways to talk to people.
Have you ever tried one of the more specialized patient social networks? So there are a number that I know off the top of my head are Health Unlocked, Inspire, Serenity, Patients Like Me. We had one, Paul Wicks, who works with us here at Sano, was there for a long time. They seem like they're obviously very successful and people use them, but they're clearly not on the scale that Facebook and Instagram are. So I'm curious whether you've used those at all.
I do. I actively use Belong.
Yes.
Yeah, the Belong MS app. I find that one very helpful for me. I can hop on it and it's just very anonymous. You can help people out. You can answer questions. But, and actually I found out about that sort of after my Facebook debacle, because as soon as I did, that was the one I got on, and it kind of saved me. It was like that, and anyone can download that. It's just a free app, but a lot of interesting information in there and ways to share and talk to the community. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's been a big one. And I think there's there are ones out there, but like I said, I use Belong, and that's been, I think, Belong MS, Belong.life.
You mentioned how, I think most of your content is really just what you want to say and what you want to get out there, but you do have people that want to run sponsored posts or content. How does that work, and what is the best practice in the industry? If you're working with a pharmaceutical company to review a new pharmaceutical product that they're working on or putting out there, do they give you editorial control over what you put out? What is is there a best practice? Because I think whenever something new like this happens and people start to use new technologies to reach out, there's always different methodologies around how it's deployed and what people like and what they don't like.
Yeah, there is a lot of legal reviews that come up with anything done through the pharmaceutical companies. I try to be really clear, like I'll put this is not a sponsored, post, so this is just my own opinion. I find something interesting and I want to write about it. A lot of times what's interesting, what the companies like to do is talk about ways to just live better with MS. They don't usually talk about their specific drug. They may, but there's a lot of guidelines. They're all a little different, but they're all pretty much, they'll give you the guidelines. They've got legal that reviews everything. All social media posts are usually, are reviewed and all of that. But their content, often they'll say, here's the topic. What would you like to, how do you want to present it? What do you think is the best way to reach your audience? And so they really like to work and make that connection and not just tell people what's going on. I think they've learned over the years that that's what people want to hear.
They want authentic you, right? That's what they signed up for.
Yes, the authentic side. Sometimes it might be too authentic, but no.
I don't think there's such a thing. I'm interested in, as we close up here, a couple more thoughts from you on what you see on the horizon, both in patient advocacy and I think you're an expert in that clearly, but also in the field of MS. What are you most excited about from either research perspective or in general, how the field is evolving?
I want to go back real quick because it'll answer this question too, as well as when we were talking about the social media. I think what's been really fun too is watching the growth of YouTube and the videos. And obviously that's like a younger, what we're seeing is this whole younger generation coming up with MS and stepping up to the plate and saying, we want to advocate. And that to me is really exciting, because all of this advocacy really just began really in the last 10 years more. I mean, it seems like, even though people have had it for years, but you see these young kids coming up and with so many fun ideas and just different things, getting the word out there. Awareness is so key. And I think as we start building more awareness with it, and as the research starts to continue to develop, I mean, over 20 drugs, we've had 3 new FDA approved drugs this year for MS. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think the more they put in, they being research people, both in ways to look for a cure, of course, but they need to know exactly, I mean, they have a general idea of what causes it, but how can we manage people's lives better? And what are some of the studies and researches out there? Like we talked about, the complementary and different alternative ways to help people live their full quality of life.
Is there anything that you feel like is missing? I mean, for me, one of the powers of giving, people like you having a prominent seat at the table is that you can identify what the real problem is, because scientists often don't have MS if they're working on MS, so they can, do their best to understand how the disease works and work towards things like that. But I'm wondering if there's anything that you feel like is still a disconnect between what people want and where the research community is focusing their efforts.
Great question. I think one thing, and it's a little bit off on that, but one thing where there's a disconnect is that I'm very fortunate. I live in the Los Angeles area, pretty big area. But it was still hard for me to find a good MS doctor.
Right.
Even though I've got insurance and all that, because my original MS neurologist was wonderful, diagnosing. She was great. And then she retired, which I never really thought doctors could retire. All of a sudden she's gone.
Oh, they do, yeah.
Yeah. And I must have seen 5 different doctors that gave me some of the worst advice, worst information. MS wasn't even their thing. They would have just stuck me on a pill. And now I'm with a really good person again, who knows a lot, who's studied COVID, who studied MS, who's been on research. There's a lot of people out there that don't have access to that kind of care. And I think that's still a big disconnect. You think of just even the smaller towns or real rural America, and even some of the doctors who aren't up on what's really going on out there. So I think I'd like to see that whole area improve.
What solutions do you see for that? I'm curious whether you have any ideas on how those, either access to the great neurologists can be improved or scaled, or how we can better as a society train doctors and neurologists in this case to be great.
It's a tough question, but I mean, I think there's a couple things there. I think one thing that I've seen recently is Dr. Boster. A lot of people follow him on social media. He was inspired at a young age, I think it was 11 or 12, wanting to be a neurologist because somebody in his family had it. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the details, but I just remember he knew at an early age. But seeing these young, energetic doctors, Dr. Singer, Dr. Boster, they're all and they're out there on social media. Yeah. And so they're out there encouraging, I think, other people to start getting, more involved in MS research. And maybe they can be inspirational for that. I think that's a big key thing. I have heard that more and more people are wanting to, study MS, but I don't have numbers or anything like that. But, I don't know. A lot of people are trying, a lot of organizations are trying to get, say, books into the hands of as many people as possible. To get their research into the hands as many people as possible. I think telemedicine could actually play a huge role in this. If I lived in a smaller town, if I could at least talk to my doctor quarterly or whatever, and then go see somebody else once a month or once a year or something to actually do the physical part, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, which I had not thought about. I think telemedicine is going to play a big role in that. So I think we need to get some money and research behind that. And we know it works. We've done the research. We know, and so that could be next step maybe.
I mentioned Dr. Singer earlier, and you just mentioned him now, and I was just so blown away by what a great neurologist and person and communicator he was. And I think if we have more people like him that can take the time to put that information out through podcasts, YouTube videos, it just is it's a zero cost thing, except for his time. It's zero cost distribution to get that out to millions of people. And I think it's just a great way to scale this. And if you couple that with telemedicine, which is something that, funnily enough, he also brought up because of COVID. I think it's not currently paid for by most insurers, healthcare systems in the U.S., but it probably will be now, because it's a great way to allow people like who may not have access to a great neurologist to even have a call once a year. With a more specialized person, even if they go to their local, their local neurologist more frequently.
Yeah, no, I've called on Dr. Singer a couple times. We've done some media tours together and stuff, and he's just always got such great insight. It's like, does this make sense? Does this make sense? And it is. It's interesting. Yeah. I did feel finally so fortunate to find my new neurologist here. So that was, but I still talk to those guys, and just hearing what they post. And that's where I get a lot on Twitter, and then they'll switch over to YouTube and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of good information now, where there used to just be a lot of bad information about bee stings and,
right.
Different things. I mean, it's actually good to see real stuff.
Absolutely. As a final question here, I was interested, we haven't talked about COVID really the whole time, but I was interested in how things have changed for you as a result of COVID, and what things, good or bad, do you see sticking for good, and which things you think are hopefully or likely not sticking around?
Well, COVID's been interesting here. I had a couple just flus or colds or something, so I was sick for a little while. I did just recently get tested just because I wanted to make sure that I was clean, and I was. I think, the good stuff was actually what I appreciated was the telemedicine and being able to still talk to my doctors that way. I just had my first in-person visit the other day, but I'd love to even just keep doing a mix of that. Lifestyle, I think one thing, though, that can be a little difficult is that sometimes people with MS have a tendency to isolate, and they can isolate. It's easy to isolate, and it's easy to, I don't need to go out. I'm tired, I'm fatigued, let me just do this. But that's not necessarily the healthiest. That's something I've got to always remind myself, like, okay, have I gone for a walk, or have at least gone out and seen something other than my desk and my computer, whatever, at my house, that social interaction.
Yeah.
And then I think just overall wellness is probably the same. I almost feel like I've taken a little worse care of myself since COVID, and I hate to admit it, but I feel that it's coming back, so that's good.
That's great. Yeah. Well, you at least live in a part of the world where you can get outside 350 days of the year, probably, based on the weather.
That's true. We've had bad air quality because we had a lot of fires going on, but it's finally a little bit better. But no, you're right. We're very fortunate, and just the little things, just going out and watching the birds, and watching butterflies and checking out the flowers, and just really getting out of your space for a while. Yeah.
Well, great, Caroline. This has been really incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time. If people want to follow you, you've got the great handle across pretty much every platform at The Girl with MS on Twitter, Facebook. Once you get it back, I think they should still follow it, and then hopefully Mark Zuckerberg will listen to this and figure out how to get you back on there. And its website as well, thegirlwithms, is it .com?
Yep. Yep. thegirlwithms.com. And I usually just end and say, take that MS. It's my big tagline there.
I love that. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.